All right, so we got one more video to go. There's just a few more slides left. Probably won't take the full 15 minutes. The print function is how we get data from your code to the monitor, to the console. This is how we give information back to the user, specifically when we're using a console. Of course, there's graphics and other things, but for the purposes of what we're doing, the print function is how we get information down to the console, which is where we give information to the user. Now, print is a really unique function, and we're going to talk about functions later. Most functions have a set number of parameters that it needs. The parameters have to be a very specific type. Print, however, does not. It can have one parameter, it can have two parameters, it can have 10 parameters, it can have integers, it can have strings, it can have whatever. It doesn't matter. Print will take whatever you put in the parentheses and spit it out to the user in the console. Input is how the user gets input to the machine. So user input allows you to print your name, or you give the user some information of what you want them to have in the input function. And what that allows is anytime you type in input, that allows the user to interact with the console and put some value in. They can type really whatever they want. The parameter here, where it says enter your name, the parameter is what you are saying to the user, not what the user is putting in. So the user is putting something in, and then you're storing this value, whatever they type in the variable on the left side of the equal sign. So remember, with all equal signs, if it's a single equal, the value to the left of the equal sign is the variable, and that's what you're putting information into. The value to the right of the equal sign is what you're putting into it, is the actual value you're working with. So you have the variable on the left and the value on the right. So in this instance down here, the variable is user input. And then to the right of the equal sign is input, the function, enter your name. The enter your name is what you are telling the user on the console. And then it gives the user an opportunity to input some value. And we're going to look at examples of this in the next video. But the idea is you can get input from the user just by using the input function. Now, one thing with the input function is it always returns a string, whatever the user types in. If they type in a 1 or a 15 or hello world, it doesn't matter. It stores it as a string. And from previous videos, from the earlier slides, you know you can't do math with a string. So if you're trying to figure out how old someone is, and they give you their birthday, well, you're going to subtract that day or that year from the current year, and that will give you how old they are, give or take, right, depending on when their birthday is in the year. But you can't do that with user input because it comes out as a string. So you have to convert it to an integer before you can actually do the math with it. So that's just a simple thing to remember, that anytime you use the input function, the data you're getting from the user is being stored as a string, regardless of how they type it in. So then there's two parameters that could go in the print function. There's the sep and the end. Sep is short for separate. Generally, if you're using the print function like this and you have hello, comma, world, it's going to print out hello space world. The comma is a delimiter. By default, the delimiter represents a space. So hello space world. If you want that to be something different than a space, something unique for whatever reason, sometimes you want the delimiter to be an @ symbol if you're pulling a bunch of information and making email addresses. Sometimes you might want it to be a hyphen if you're making phone numbers or something like that. It doesn't matter what you're making, but when you want it to be something other than a space, you have to conclude your print statement with the sep equals, and then in quotes what you want the separator to be. Again, by default it's a space, but in this example they made it a hyphen, so now you get hello hyphen world instead of hello space world. And again, we'll look at some examples with this actually in practice. But for the most part, just remember that sep is the separator between different strings in the print function. End is similar to that, right? So it's a parameter that goes on the end of a print function. By default, the print function ends with a new line. It always returns to a new line when you're done with the function. If you want it to do anything other than return to a new line, then you just have to put the end equals and what you want it to end the line with. So in this example, hello world, normally without this end exclamation point, it would say hello world, and then on the next line, it would say this is on the same line. But because they put in the parameter end exclamation point, it ends the first print statement with an exclamation point, and then it goes ahead and prints the next print statement on the same line. If there were another print statement here, it would go to the next line because this doesn't have the end parameter that it would need. So the default is always just go to the next line. And 99% of the time, that's what you want it to do. So it's good to know that end exists. It's good to know that sep exists. I don't use those very often, but it's good to know that they're there because when you do need them, you really need it to be exactly like that. So as a summary, we primarily focused on operators and how to input individual elements of code. Last session, we looked at mostly terminology. This session was less about the terminology, a little bit more about the semantics and the way that the operators interact when you actually write them into code. We didn't look at a lot of syntax, but we looked at what things actually do when you put them into code. So what I'm going to do in the next video is open up onlinepython.com, and we're just going to create some simple lines of code. There will be a submission for you to kind of spit a screenshot or those lines of code out, just to make sure you've gone through the process and you're familiar with it. So we'll talk about that. It'll be one more 15-minute video this week, or today rather, and then tomorrow we'll pick up the rest of it. So appreciate you all. We'll see you in the next video.